found myself in this warped cycle of, oh my God, but I still got to pay bills. We still have a mortgage. We still got to pay this. But to get those things, you kind of got to either hurt people or ignore people being hurt.
Today's guest is Rendel Solomon, a Chicago entrepreneur working to democratize wealth. After 13 years in private equity, where he rose to managing director, Rendel left in 2020, moved by the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to pursue racial equity through finance. He co-founded InHeirit, an AI estate planning platform, and One Stock, One Future, which turns youth into shareholders. He also appeared on TEDx. Rendel champions purpose-driven entrepreneurship for systemic change.
What did they think about your identity and you stepping away from this path that everyone assumed that you would just be on forever?
How did family react? Folks were proud that I was taking a stand and not following the path that others perhaps believed I should have. But best believe there were definitely people in my life who were like, are you crazy? You're leaving? You don't leave private equity. Term anti-capitalist. I use it somewhat jokingly, but it's a very serious matter. I'm merely suggesting that there are inherent characteristics of capitalism that have a close intersection with the oppression that we're seeking to address.
So can you tell me about how you navigate that tension between making systemic change and also driving sustainable revenue?
As part of InHeirit, I keep the same thing in mind. So I believe that the product itself, one, it aligns very much with my own brand and personal mission around financial empowerment, financial education. Two, the overall idea is to reduce the cost that one might incur going through a traditional estate planning process. Three, helping to protect from the financial cost of having no plan in place at all.
So can you talk about what your vision for a truly equitable economy might look like?
You got it. Well, the good news is
Is your brand polished on the outside but messy behind the scenes? The logo is clean, the colors pop, but the messaging is confusing and the content is all over the place. And the conversions, they flatline because of that. That's what Thread Strategy steps in. We help purpose-driven brands clarify their voice, unify their visuals, and build strategies that actually work online and in real life. At Threya, strategy isn't an afterthought, it's the entire framework. We're not here to just sound good. We're here to build bold, integrated brands that shift culture and scale impact. So if you're done winging it and you're ready to build with clarity, confidence, and consistency, head to threastrategy.com. That's THREI strategy.com and book your brand clarity session today. Because good visuals are cool, but strategy, that's what scales.
Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier-Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance and operations consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today, we're joined by Rendel Solomon, a Chicago-based entrepreneur whose family journey from sharecropping to shareholding has become the foundation for a remarkable mission of wealth democratization. After 13 years in private equity, leaving as a managing director, Rendel made the bold decision to leave his lucrative career in 2020 following the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, pivoting to fight for racial equality through finance. He's the co-founder of InHeirit, an AI-enhanced estate planning platform breaking down cultural taboos around death and legacy planning, and the founder of One Stock, One Future, an initiative that's turned thousands of youth into public company shareholders. A TEDx Chicago speaker, the phrase sharecropper to shareholder, Rendel represents the powerful intersection of purpose-driven entrepreneurship and systemic change. His work spans from supporting diverse fund managers through VC Include to winning the 2024 Southside Pitch Competition with InHeirit. Today, we'll explore how this recovering engineer, reformed private equity investor, and aspiring anti-capitalist is building businesses that keep wealth within communities for generations. So Rendel, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to have you here. I know we always have great conversations, and I can't wait to see what we get into today.
thank you so much for inviting me. Really happy to be here. And please remind me to bring you on the road for any of my shows or performances or speeches to have you do my introductions. That was perfect.
Great. I mean, there was so much to pack in there, so many things to choose from. So We are going to jump right into the meat, your story, one of the most fascinating parts to me. So you were, a managing director, not just a PE firm, but, a billion-dollar plus PE firm, a big name. And by most measures, you made it. That was the pinnacle. So what was the moment in 2020 when you realized that you had to walk away and answer a different calling?
Thank you for that question. That was indeed a very pivotal moment in my life, a life that had, for the most part, been pretty linear, even
Yeah.
though having grown up low income, west side of Chicago, we'll talk more about that later. But thankfully, my parents had me and my sisters on a path, education, get the job, make some money, like things were working. So then 2020 comes along, and while it wasn't an instant shift for me, it was something that had been gradually growing. Two words you used in describing your own background, but also in describing mine. I'm going to use the words activism and anti-capitalist. Now, activism, people think radical, they think protest. I
Hmm.
just think of activism as being willing to speak out against things that may
Yes.
be unpopular to speak out against. So that's one. That was my version of activism. And I found that in the space where I worked, Rendel Solomon, the budding social activist, financial activist, could not operate and be successful within that space, which is wrought with all the systemic issues that we can
Right.
go on and on about, the exclusionary practices of who gets to manage capital, the VC capital going to entrepreneurs, and the lack of capital towards diverse entrepreneurs and diverse fund managers. So I'm experiencing that in a space where I'm getting some levels of individual success, but my individual success was, in my mind, starting to be overwhelmed by the fact that the majority of people who look like me weren't doing well. So therefore, my individual success was no longer as satisfying, one. And two, I'm limited in the things that I can say and do in
Right.
order to speak out and protest. And the term anti-capitalist, which gets thrown around a bit, I use it somewhat jokingly, but it's a very serious matter. People hear me say that and they think, oh, well, what else are we going to do? We're going to be socialists or communists? And I'm not here to speak about political or economic structures. I'm merely suggesting that there are inherent characteristics of capitalism that have a close intersection with the oppression that we're seeking to address. And it's difficult to
Absolutely.
extricate them. And so the mere participation in capitalism unfortunately leads to the same oppression they were trying to fight against. So I found myself in this warped cycle of, oh my God, but I still got to pay bills. We still have a mortgage. We still got to pay this.
Right.
But to get those things, you kind of got to either hurt people or ignore people being hurt. That's a sort of a big picture approach to it. And it's not that simple, but I started to feel that during my time in private equity and decided, you know what, I needed some space to allow my brain to rethink what it is I had been programmed, in a sense, to believe and understand for that first 40 years of my life.
Absolutely. And that takes a lot of intentional work because, like you said, when you're on that track, so to get to the level within the firm that you were at the age that you were, like you have to be pretty singularly focused. I know people in college used to joke and call me, I won't say the name of the firm, but they would use the acronym of the firm and then my name. And that was a way to differentiate me from other Rachels because that was so much a part of my identity that people just assumed that, Rachel's on partner track. She's going to do X, Y, or Z. And I did take that to, a certain level. I did, all of that sunk in and it did feel kind of like my identity. So walking away was a complete mind warp in some ways. And so I'd love to talk about that process, kind of what you were thinking as you walked away. And then also tying into that, we've talked about your family, and you often share that your family went from being sharecroppers to shareholders within 68 years. Along that journey, I imagine that, your family had to sacrifice a lot of things for you and your siblings to get you to where you were, to position you
Mhm.
to where you were. What did they think about your identity and you stepping away from this path that everyone, maybe assumed that you would just be on forever?
So let me take the family and then I'll get back to my mindset second. thankfully, I was in sort of a blessed and fortunate position. I've lost both my mom and my dad. My mom back in 2006, my dad in 2020. And my mom was only 47 years old, and my
Right.
dad was a little over 60, in his mid 60s. And with mom, it was interesting. I've shared that my mom's approach to raising us, my recollection, trying to think back, is one of focus and discipline early on. I remember the intense
Mhm.
focus on education. There was never a lot of idle time. There was always extracurricular programs and activities, either after school, weekends, summers. Like, she always had us in things that pushed us forward academically. And for all intents and purposes, that worked. I went on to be in the part of the first generation in my family to go to college, engineering degree from Tulane. Both my younger sisters went to U of I, Champaign, and even for high school, for those in Chicago listening to this podcast, you'll know these schools. But I went to Latin. My middle sister went to Providence A&L, and the youngest sister went to Walter Payton. So we
Okay.
all got a great education. But I do recall sort of at age 16, 17, like once we were starting to approach early adulthood, mid-teen, early adulthood, hitting 18, I wouldn't say mom backed off, but we had freedom to make decisions for ourselves. I think that she
He's so
recognized
grateful.
that she poured in all that she could up to that point. Doesn't mean she's disowning us or not caring for
Right.
us after that. It's just, I've done what I can do. Whatever mistakes you're going to make now, whatever decisions you're going to make, that's on you now. I've given you and helped you gain the tools.
Right.
Also, you talk about the sacrifice piece. As a parent now, my daughter, Savannah, I'm able to be in her life, especially in this first 3.5 years, in a way that unfortunately my mom couldn't, especially as we got older, because she had 3 kids. My dad struggled with alcoholism for many years. He did work and provide, and he was around, but mom carried the bulk of that weight, which meant that she's working, from as much as I can remember, 2 jobs. So
Yeah.
she's leaving the house at 6 a.m. and not back in the house until 9 p.m. That is a big chunk of the day and the week and the life of your kids that you just don't get to see. So you talk about the
Yeah.
sacrifice. That was it. She sacrificed some of that physical time and the ability to oversee us because we needed that income for the household. And for that, I'm truly thankful. And so going back to the question of how did family react, I think that kind of carried on. Unless they just didn't tell me, for the most part, folks were proud. Folks were proud.
Yeah.
Folks were proud that I was taking a stance and not following the path that others perhaps believed I should have. But best believe there were definitely people in my life who were like, "Are you crazy? You're leaving private equity? Like, you don't leave private equity. The only people who leave private equity are people starting their own private equity firm,
Right.
or maybe they've made enough money where they can retire, or maybe they just want to go get into politics and do something different. But folks don't leave MD roles in private equity. I wouldn't say abruptly, but fairly abruptly.
That is very, very true. I know that, and I wonder too, the broader kind of social environment that was going on in 2020, how that also played into it. I recall back when um, I left public accounting the first time, my grandfather was just perplexed because he's like, everything that we have done was so that you could be there. Why are you walking away to do something harder, something that is not as certain? And unfortunately, as I had conversations with him and talked about some of the things that I was facing, a new level of understanding, but I think also just a disappointment on his end that despite everything that his generation had sacrificed, that I was dealing with some of the same things and some of the same systemic issues that he, had worked so hard to overcome. And so I know that there are all of these factors when you are part of those first generations to do different things that come into how our families perceive the paths that we take. But it is wonderful that, you still have your siblings here and that they were able to provide support and be proud of you for taking this next step, even if some of your colleagues thought you might have been a little crazy.
And just to be even more transparent, I got plenty of inspirational messages from people who said, "Oh my God, Rendell, I've wanted to do that for so long."
Really?
And unfortunately, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really worth noting. These
Yes.
folks were like, "Rendell, oh my God, I've been wanting to say that. I've been wanting to do that. I can't stand it here." But unfortunately, hashtag capitalism, they
Yes.
feel stuck,
Yes.
and they don't feel that capability to just leave. And to be even more transparent, within 1 year of me leaving, I was engaged, found out we were expecting a baby, bought a house, got married.
Wow.
And I don't think that's coincidence either. I think that this work life, this hustle life, this make money life gets in the way of trying to build relationship and raise family. Sure, people do it. I'm not
Yes.
suggesting folks that work in the industries at the level and the demand that you and I had aren't getting married and having kids. But I think that the life that they have with their family oftentimes
100%.
gets sacrificed.
Yeah.
And
And I think
I
that the
knew I
data
know I
backs
didn't
that up.
want that. Yep. I didn't want that kind of life. Doesn't mean that as an entrepreneur now, which we'll get into, means that I got like an abundance of time, but there is a little more flexibility
Yes.
there than the rigid structure and the travel schedule and the trying to raise money for PE that would have had me getting FaceTimes and texts and phone calls about Savannah's first step, first tooth, first
Right.
smile, first words, first putting on her clothes, potty training. I've been at home for all of that, and there's no amount of money that I would be willing to accept to miss that. And you and I both know people, especially in our respective industries, that have lived that life. They did not raise their children. They were investors in their families. They set money. They showed up what they
Investors in
could.
their families.
They were investors in their families. They provided capital, whether it's the man or the woman, and
Right.
they weren't there in the
And
way that I knew I wanted to. And I think the point you made about the generational shifts, right? You know, Gen X, Boomer, you got millennial, different viewpoints, different experiences, and that was a big one for me. That conflict with particularly African American male boomers
mhm.
and the view of what success should look like, what excellence looks like, and this belief that, well, if you just keep making a lot of money, you can fix
Right.
those issues that you want to go protest and scream about. And I say, well, how's that working out? Because we keep talking about all this capital that we have, the buying power that we have. This is beyond just capital to me. And every time you get online, there's another influencer telling you, just go make money. Don't worry about those issues. Just go make money and those issues will fix themselves. And I just fundamentally don't believe in that. I don't believe mere act of going to try to generate as much capital as you can will resolve systemic issues, because the process of generating that capital, in my opinion, leads people to simply become the one with the whip and not the one being whipped. And that's, again, that's just,
A
it's a
conversation people don't want to have.
whole conversation that people don't want to have. They feel insulted by. And that was a lot of the conflict that I experienced as well. One more item about the conflicts at work. You asked about my feelings. I'm going to give you a very direct and poignant example of the conflict I was experiencing that led me to say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. You brought up George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Laquan McDonald here in Chicago. And so I'll talk about police violence for a second. And I'm not suggesting that police violence is the greatest threat to humanity by any stretch of the imagination from a statistical numbers perspective, right? Much greater likelihood of other stuff happening than of being violated by a police officer. But I will say this. The firm where I was, we managed public pension funds, teachers, firemen, etc. So imagine one of those incidents happens and I want to post on social media about it, about how wrong it is, and be in solidarity with that family, and push for investigations and making sure justice is earned for the
Right.
individuals and families that have been affected. Or I want to go to the protests to speak out against police violence. The very next week, I could find myself in the meeting with their board begging for $10 million to manage some of their capital.
Yeah. An inherent
I'm gonna let that sit there for a second, right? I want to go
inherent conflict.
protest. I want to go protest police violence, but also got to put the suit on and the happy black man face and say, "Hi, we're really good at managing money. please let us manage some of your pension dollars. And
Right.
but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about historically their views around certain groups of people, their treatment of certain groups of people. But I got to put the happy black man face on. And that's symbolic of what we've seen throughout history in America, particularly in the African American experience, where you have to put on a face in order to
Yes.
survive. And I think that's the big generational gap. You talked about it was your grandfather. I had some of that same experience as well with a mentor, where it's more about put on the face, don't rock the boat, don't make too much noise, keep moving, make the money, don't rock the boat. But I think that what you and I have, Rachel, with our education, with the jobs that we've had, what I don't think they appreciate is the sacrifices that they made gave us the ability to do more than just sit there and be happy with what the crumbs were being provided.
Exactly.
And that terrifies them because they're afraid that, oh my God, my child, my mentee, my grandchild is going to speak up and the system is going to destroy them for doing that.
Yes. And I think that it's one of those things, like if we think of Maslow's hierarchy and having core needs met, that because
Mhm.
they elevated us where we, even if our families had to work hard to provide, that we did not struggle in ways that they had to struggle, it gave us the freedom to realize the cost of what that constant masking does to us, because it's not cost free. And the toll that that can take on a person and their psyche is something that there was no space for, in a lot of ways, for previous generations to realize. And then now we're realizing, my soul is never at rest when it's constantly warring between these realities that I'm seeing as a Black person in America and what I am expected to, show up and perform at a certain level to get through day to day in corporate. And I want to go back to 2 points that you made that I
Yeah.
thought were especially poignant. One, the kind of anti-hustle culture is something that I know we give, the what are they, Gen Z, a lot of flack for it, but I've learned a bit from them, and I that's something that we very firmly espouse, with in our, company, that we want to get our clients to a place where they can just flat out reject hustle culture, that we don't want
Yes.
to build companies based on hustle and just sacrificing everything else in your life.
The
And
sleep
we
when you
were
the sleep when you die mindset.
I cannot stand that phrase.
Yeah, it's insane.
And when you were describing that and some of the moments that you were able to show up for Savannah, it reminded me, I saw on social media a couple weeks ago a walk of a bunch of Black fathers in Hyde Park. And then I think I saw you, you know, with Savannah in a stroller on this walk with all of these Black fathers. And my first thought was like, man, I wish I'd known about that so I could have told my husband to go. But it just like warmed my heart to such a level to see all of these engaged fathers just hanging out with each other and bonding and really making I don't it, wasn't designed to be like a political stance, but
Mhm.
the act of gathering that many people and the attention that that's gathering as you are walking, through this very populated part of Hyde Park, that reshapes narratives and thoughts that people carry around, and the privilege to be able to do that.
It was a beautiful thing. It's an organization called Daddy Victory Club, and we take a walk about once a month. And the one we did back in June, we just had one last Saturday, and then the one we did in June is the one that folks started seeing that went viral, where you probably saw a piece
Ah,
with
yes.
Savannah, and part of that was because a buddy of mine who used to be on the radio here, Kyle Santilli, he's in Atlanta now, a really good dude, but he was in town for the
Okay.
walk. And so he walked with his older son. And so he asked a few brothers to say their name. So then he creates a post. And because he's a media personality and a radio personality,
Yes.
it started getting picked up. And next thing you know, his TikTok had like 10,000 plus reactions. And if you get 10,000 reactions, can we imagine how many views you've got?
Mhm.
I don't know what the ratio is typically to reactions to views, but my guess is it's anywhere from 50 to 100 times the number of views on the platform. And so then more media, more press started picking it up. There have been a couple of news stories. A good brother here in Chicago named Corey Marshall is one of the founders of that organization. So there will be another one. You'll be able to tell your husband about it, and he can bring your baby along.
These are the things that there are all of these human sides of the decisions that we make, and being able to show up for those things, because to a certain degree, I know that the generation before me, even though they made these sacrifices, as I'm having conversations with them now, sometimes they're telling me, I wish that I had the freedom or the ability to do things different, to be present
Yeah.
for those moments. Those are the things that actually matter.
I mean, there's some intentionality that's required, obviously having that freedom and that flexibility, but it's also about the intentionality and saying, you know what, I'm going to do it. We're as part of InHeirit, which we're going to get to. I'm going through an accelerator right now. We were accepted to Pharrell's Black Ambition
Oh, congrats.
prize competition. Yeah, so we're going through that right now, and these first few weeks are all about founder wellness, and
Mm,
and so it's not even about the company. There's no
yes,
session has been about what does your company do, how do you generate revenue, your pitch deck, your sales model, your
I
investors. It's
love that.
about us as founders and as entrepreneurs, and most importantly, as human beings.
Yes.
And I was on a call just the other day, and one person talked about how they weren't able to do some of the activities and the worksheets for the program because they're scheduled this and they didn't have time for that. And the moderator, organizer, leader, or the coach said to them, it's a very simple phrase. They said, so let me understand this. You don't have time in your schedule. And they paused. And she re-emphasized the term your schedule. And then she said it again, your schedule. Nobody's creating your schedule for you. So if you don't have time in your schedule, you didn't put the time in your schedule. And it's easier for us to say, oh, but I had to be here and I had to be there and I had to be here
Right.
and I had to be there. No, those people will be just fine if you don't show up. Make a decision to show up for the things that are important
Yes.
to you. And if whether it's missing a day of work, not going on that trip, delegating something to someone else, but find that time as opposed to waiting the 20 years and saying, oh man, I
Right.
wish I would have.
Glad that they have that accountability, and I love to hear that they have that focus on entrepreneurial wellness. We actually have, as part of our onboarding process for our clients, have an entrepreneurial wellness assessment for them to complete, and then we track over time how, because we want to, obviously we want the business to do better, but we also track their personal net worth, their wellness, how the business is
Mhm.
impacting their lives. Because if we're not taking this holistic approach, then in my mind, what are we doing?
Absolutely. The business can't survive without the human.
Yes. And we forget that so, so frequently.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot us back around to you've described yourself a few times as an aspiring anti capitalist,
Hmm.
but you're also working to build a profitable business. So can you tell me about how you navigate that tension between um, making systemic change and also driving sustainable revenue?
Yeah, I think I threw the word aspiring in there as a sort of a CYA hedge in a sense, because I'm still learning
Yes.
exactly what does that mean. I'm reading, I'm learning, I'm not reading as much as I should, but I have definitely downloaded books about other economic systems and capitalism because I want to better understand
Mm-hmm.
how do you operate in a sustainable way within a structure that seems inherently unsustainable
Right.
by its mere practice, right? The idea that you can go out and build virtually unlimited levels of wealth is in a sense inhumane. It basically says
Yeah.
that one person or can continue to extract even when they
Yes.
don't need anything else. You talk about hierarchy of needs, right? Every need for you and the next 4 generations in your family has been met, yet you're still extracting for some reason. How do you balance that, as you asked, with trying to build a business that needs revenues, needs profitability in order
Right.
to work? I'm still learning that. I think right now, and we'll talk more about the business. I believe the service itself is of value. I believe it is of value for maintaining wealth, to preserving wealth within families. And I think that that is a noble cause and mission, one that I wish I knew more about earlier in my life. So that's step one, right?
Right.
Is it a good or service that generally has more positive benefits for society than not? Quick side story. I was an artist manager in the music business at one point in my career. During my time in New York in business school. That actually what took me to New York. I wanted to go to business school, but I was like, I have to be in New York if I'm going to manage music artists. And I got into that because a buddy of mine in Cincinnati, while I was working at Procter & Gamble, was a producer. And I saw him start to generate revenue from making beats. And I was like, well, I'm not creative. I don't rap, write, sing, produce, dance, choreograph, none of that. But I'm a project manager at P&G. I know budgets, schedules, resources, deadlines. And I said, what role can I play? So I found out about artist management. I said, let's give it a shot. But managing artists is a little bit different than managing a project for toilet paper or toothpaste, because artists talk back and they have opinions, right? Toilet paper doesn't
Right.
have an opinion. It just put it on a roll and ship it off to the stores. But what I realized during that time in the music business is that there was certain types of music that I knew I didn't want to be a part of. And it was weird trying to balance. I was willing to listen to it, certain more aggressive forms of hip hop, call it gangster rap, whatever you want to call it. I found the beats and the music to be enjoyable for me.
Right.
But I also wasn't comfortable going home to tell Granny, "Hey, Granny, this is this is the song I worked on. This is the song that I'm making money from." So I
Right.
think that was an early stage career example of choosing morality and sort of my own values,
Right.
and as opposed to just what was going to make me the most money. So now let's fast forward. Sorry for that little tangent. Let's come
Oh,
back to now
not at all.
inherit, right? I keep the same thing in mind. So I believe that the product itself, one, it aligns very much with my own brand and personal mission around
Mhm.
financial empowerment, financial education, right? So check mark on that. Two, it is something that has an expense and is going to generate revenue. The overall idea is to reduce the cost that one might incur going through a traditional estate planning process. Three, also helping to protect from the financial cost of having no plan in place at all. And so with
Yes.
those things in mind, the goal and the mission of the business, I can be more comfortable with the fact that it does generate revenue. In the future, I am going to be faced undoubtedly with some point of conflict around a decision, me and the co-founders, a decision for the business where I may question, does this still align with my personal morals and values? Back to those exercises I told you that we're going through in the accelerator. And I'm sure every entrepreneur has faced this. It's like, damn it, this is going to be really good for the business and generate a lot of money, but it definitely goes against some of my values, and maybe at different levels. And I think it becomes a slippery slope. I think we start to tell ourselves, well, that's not that bad, so let's do that. And that's how entire communities get polluted. That's how people
Yes.
get kicked out of homes. That's
Yes.
how people lose jobs, because we're making decisions for businesses and corporations that aren't at the overall benefit of humanity. So I think the short answer to the question is always being aware of that. So then when you come to that pivotal moment, you take a step back and ask yourself, why was I doing this?
Mm.
Why was I doing this? Was I doing this just for money? Was I doing this just for revenue, just for income, just for wealth? Or was there a deeper mission and passion for that business that you started or was a part of at the early stages? And just being mindful of that at every step of the company.
Absolutely. And I want to dig into this to paint the picture for the audience, for those who may have the fortune of never having experienced uh, what happens to a family, what you go through when that estate plan is not in place. And also just to bring the context for people of what the traditional cost structure looks like for these type of plans. So I know when I was pregnant with my son and we talked to our financial advisor and we're getting referrals for attorneys to look into estate plannings. The I think the lowest cost that we saw was maybe
5 to 10.
it was not cheap. And then when my son was born and experienced some catastrophic injuries during his birth,
Mm,
that number increases because our estate planning got a lot more complex because we did not know what his care needs might look like for the rest of his life, or asking someone to take on guardianship when your kid has special needs is a completely different conversation than if you have a kid who does not have those additional needs that they will have to have someone step up and cover. And so this is the way that you're planning to structure Inherit, and the cost structure is a radical departure from the status quo. But can you talk a little bit more about that just to ground people in, the
yeah.
problem you're really solving?
There's an accessibility issue and affordability issue around estate planning. There's a psychological issue, unfortunately,
Yes.
because it forces us, causes us, leads us to have to recognize our own mortality. But it's also one of the few products and services that you're going to buy, Rachel, that's not directly for you. Like, it's literally for everyone else,
That
but
part.
not you, right? And so we have to train ourselves around the joy of what our family can experience when we're
Yes.
no longer here, right? That
You're
our tagline.
providing them peace
Yes,
and
our tagline is
structure.
"Start the conversation, secure your legacy, and get back to joy." And we're
Yes.
leaning into that joy aspect, wanting people to understand that this doesn't have to be a morbid, sad
Right.
conversation. Whatever age you are, 20, 30, or 40 years old going through this process, it's meant to bring that peace of mind that your family is going to be taken care of and not taken advantage of when you're
Yes.
not here, right? If you're a provider, protector, a lover, nurturer, carer, however you define yourself, you want those things to remain with your family. And so, as it relates to the pricing, one other aspect that we want to shift is it's also not a one-time process. What's going to be challenging for us and others who are playing in this end-of-life care, death care, online estate planning space is shifting the mindset of consumers away from, well, why would I pay you on a recurring basis for this, right? I've filled in the information, I've done my documents, I'll just pay you a fee and I'm done. Because that's an older
Right.
way of, or
The
antiquated
traditional
way of
model.
thinking, this traditional model. That plan needs changing anyway. Even in the traditional world, you're gonna have to go back on a regular basis. Maybe it's
Right.
once a year, maybe it's once every 2 years, but definitely every time there's a significant life change. New kid, new partner, separations, divorces, moving cities, buying a new home, getting a new job, opening a new investment account. Every one of those activities requires an update to the estate plan. And guess what? You're going to call that attorney. And this is not to say don't use attorneys, right?
Right.
We're not here to replace lawyers. We're not lawyers. We're an online system that seeks to facilitate that process that hopefully will bring hundreds of thousands or millions of more Americans into this step of taking an estate plan. And so that
Yes.
they're not worried about, oh, I have to call an attorney right now. In the same way that TurboTax shifted the accounting field,
Right.
didn't eliminate CPAs and accountants. They're very much an integral part of what TurboTax does. TurboTax just said, look, you don't have to go to an office to do your taxes now. You don't have to bring a box of paper in. With technology, just upload your W-2 and you're pretty much done. And for most people, that was a great way to get it done. Let's go back to the music business for one more second. I was in the business and I got into it in part because of the shift that I saw happening 2000, 2001, 2002. These are my first 2 years out of undergrad. So I'm leaving undergrad. I'm an adult now. The dot com has come and gone, but there's still amazing companies that have been formed, the Googles, the Apples of the world that were starting to take off. And I'm looking at the music business that my buddy was in, and I'm looking at artist management, and I'm thinking to myself, this industry seemed to be going through a bit of a shift. I don't know what's going to come on the other end, but something's changing with how we consume music. This is the era of ringtones. It's the era of Napster and LimeWire. And I watched the music industry almost implode. because they had no idea how to deal with the fact that
Right.
people were stealing their music. And so what did they do? They reacted. They started suing people. They started putting lockdowns on how music could, and that was just not the right approach. They didn't know that at the time, but they were fighting for their life. It was a survival mechanism. So then iTunes, iPhone, other devices, Spotify, Pandora, and what you saw happen in the industry, Rachel, is that it went from 90% physical consumption, so still CDs and some records,
Right.
to flipping the entire other direction 20 years later. You look at a chart of the recorded music industry right now, and as someone as analytical and as intellectual as I know you to be, you'd be fascinated by this chart because you literally see it drop to from I'm maybe bastardizing the numbers a bit, but let's say it was at a $18 billion, $19 billion industry, drop to like 4 or 5. I mean, it's bad. And then you see it jump back up into those mid to high teens, but now 90% of it is streaming and downloads. The industry found a way to reinvent itself in terms of, and consumers reinvented how we brought in music. As I think about estate planning, my faith, my hope, my belief is that there's going to be a path that where we see consumers move from that physical binder of files sitting in a safe or a closet
Right.
to being stored in an online cloud system like InHeirit. So now everything is there. It's accessible by multiple people that you delegate. If the house burns down or you're in a tornado or you're in a flood, and I'm using those examples purposefully, thinking about the unfortunate natural disasters that we've seen just in the past 12 to 18 months,
Right.
guess what? Those files are still there. So even so, it's not just a death platform. It is truly a life platform because everything you need from you're looking for a birth certificate or your passport information or your child's document or the deed to the house or the title to the car, it's all sitting right there. So you can start to rebuild more efficiently as opposed to having to go to every single office and in the downtown of your city trying to figure out, oh my God, how do I get these files? I lost all my IDs. How do I even prove who I am right now?
As you were talking about that, and then also the music industry example of how new information came to play that fundamentally reshaped how things were done. It reminded me of something that I heard you say once about one stock, one future. How when you came into it, you didn't. One thing that didn't come to mind at first is that some of the families wouldn't even be able to redeem their stock certificates because they didn't have bank accounts. And um, so when we're talking about kind of reshaping industries and ways of doing things, sometimes we encounter an unknown like that is necessary to completely address the problem. So can you talk a little bit about um, how you took when you found that information out, what you did at that point to instead of being like the music industry was and just be reactive and panic
Yes.
to actually problem solve?
So bring me back to that point if I forget, but I have another backstory related to trying to solve the investing
Oh, perfect.
challenge that we've seen in the country, particularly with trying to get young people started, because there's lots of programs for kids out there.
Totally.
And so let me talk about part of the inspiration for One Stock, in addition to me giving stock to my niece when she was 8 years old, which I do talk about in my TEDx, so I won't go through that story right now. Please visit sharecropper.shareholder.com to see the TEDx. But
We'll drop that in the notes for the
please
podcast.
do. Please do. But Chicago Urban League played a key role in the development of One Stock, One Future and a leadership development program called New Leaders Council. So One Stock, One Future was actually my capstone project for that
Okay.
6 month, I think maybe 6 to 9 month leadership program here in Chicago. And I was asked by the Urban League to come in and teach a workshop to kids about investing. And there was a financial institution, I forget which one, but no free ads. There was a financial institution that agreed to provide some funds to these young people to open brokerage accounts.
Okay.
And so this is 2016, I believe, around the time I came up with the idea. So I agreed to go teach this workshop to these kids, meeting I think once a week on Saturdays for the next few months. I showed up to the first session, Rachel, and there were 3 kids in there. 1, 2, 3. And I asked myself, thinking about what my mom went through, the program she had us in. You told my mom there was a financial institution that was going to give us $200, $300, or $400 for opening an investment account. She's like, you're there. We're getting you there. I don't care what it takes. We didn't have a car. Maybe Granny have to bring her car over to get, but we were going to get to that program. The same way folks go get in line for these Jordans. I'm not here to criticize. I'm merely acknowledging. What do they say online nowadays? We listen and we don't judge. But there are lines for new shoes. There was no line to get these stocks. And I asked myself, I said, man, what? Why aren't they here? I asked the Urban League administrator. I was like, did you guys not market this thing? Did you not go into the community and go to the schools and go to the other programs to actually draw the kids in? Did you simply send out a newsletter and hope they would come? And so I took a step back, also thinking about upbringing challenges that I saw on the west side of Chicago. And I said, maybe there's a deeper reason they aren't here. Maybe the parent or parents simply couldn't get them there. Maybe the parents thought it was important, but they had 4 kids in the household, and one had to go do this, and one had to go do that, and so the one that would have come to the stock investing program, there was no transportation for them. There was no, so they just had to let that one go.
Yeah.
Maybe it is the parents' fears or concerns about what they don't know. So maybe the kids aren't there because the parents like, I don't know what this stock investing thing is about. So if I don't know what it's about, then my kid's not going to the program. I don't know. I'm merely theorizing the way a good scientist or engineer would. I'm thinking about what are the reasons they wouldn't come. And I sought to resolve those reasons. Even though I didn't hear it directly, I started listing out reasons why a young person would not be at a program like this. And I think the third one was, for oftentimes these programs require long time commitments. Every Saturday for 3 months. These kids are already in school Monday to Friday all day. And as someone who did very well in school, so I wasn't intimidated by it, I enjoyed it, but I did get tired of it. I'm still a kid who wants to go do other things. I'm sick of doing homework. I'm sick of sitting in classes. Here's another A. Can I go do something else? Now, I wrote the essay. Can I go do something else? Now, I didn't, and so we add more programming for every day, every night, every weekend, and the kid doesn't have space to just be a kid. So with One Stock, One Future, I said, let me do this. One, I'm not going to have these classes that the kids have to come to and spend a bunch of time on in order to earn the stock. I'm going to go to them. I'm going to partner with organizations and programs that already have the kids there. That way, I'm just showing up to them. So there's nothing new for them to do. It's already built in. Whether it's a sports team, an after-school program, or a classroom at a school, you already have the young people captive. I'm just showing up. 2, I'm simply giving away stock. It's like the movie Stand and Deliver, I believe.
Yes.
Teacher out in California, Jaime Escalante, I believe was his name, where he told these young slightly misbehaved youth in high school, who didn't want to pay attention. He told them they all had A's. And they got quiet. He was like, when you have an A? I haven't done anything. He was like, you have an A. All you guys have an A right now. All I ask is that you do these things in order to keep it. It was the first time they'd ever had an A. Sadly, they had all been, sort of failed or low performing students, but now they have an A. So same thing with stocks. Rather than make these young people earn the stock, I said, look, let's just give them stock and let's see, does that change any mindsets? Does that change their desire to want more? And there were numerous examples of young people that I heard over the years start to pursue careers in finance. That wasn't the goal, but I just wanted them to understand investing. They've continued to ask for more stock from their family because they got this first stock through One Stock, One Future. I asked you to get me back on track. I went a little long with that one. So I gave you one problem that got solved.
No, it's all coming full circle.
The parents that didn't know, they didn't redeem. This is a really interesting example. As I gave out these gift certificates to go purchase stock on one of the brokerage platforms, I could see the list of codes. It's like a gift card, essentially.
Right.
I could see which ones had been redeemed. And unfortunately, dozens of them were going unredeemed. 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. So I circled back and I asked a few of the non-redeemers, sounds like something out of the Bible, by the way, non-redeemer. I asked some of the non-redeemers, just curious, do you care to share why you aren't utilizing, and just for clarification for the audience, was giving away $20 worth of stock. And so, in the past 5 to, 10 years, it's become more popular, more acceptable, and more technologically capable of people buying what's called fractional shares. So that now if a company's stock, to buy a piece of that company, costs $500, you don't need $500 to buy a piece of that company. You can invest $50 and you'd own 1/10 of one full share. So in giving out $20 worth of stock, because it wasn't the monetary value that was important for me for One Stock, One Future, it was the concept of ownership, which didn't require a lot. And that $20, by the way, is going to grow at the same rate as a $2,000 investment.
Right.
One of the parents revealed to me that when they saw that they got a $20 gift certificate to, let's say, Amazon, and Amazon was trading at, I don't know, $1,200, whatever it was at the time, they thought they needed to come up with the other $1,180 to be able to buy Amazon. And so they
That's
just
so
let it.
important to get curious and ask questions
Gotta
instead
ask.
of leading with judgment.
Absolutely. And so I was able to then start to do more explanations and I included that information and tried to make it more explicit that they could indeed buy a piece of Amazon for that $20 that would generate the same level of benefit as someone who was able to invest a lot more money. So yes, conversation, dialogue, asking questions, curiosity will often lead to solutions that you weren't necessarily aware of.
And I think that that's something that is a key takeaway for people listening. You talked a lot along the throughout the conversation about how you are still learning about different things, and that when you encounter different things, that you lead with curiosity, you check your values, and then you adjust and you problem solve. And I think sometimes we come into things thinking we have to have the entire picture figured out before we can get started, and that simply isn't the case.
That's absolutely been me my whole life. Again, engineer, that's just math, science. Before I could do, I needed to first fully understand and see.
Yes.
And I think that's held me back from probably a lot of things in my life. And it wasn't until, before we actually started the recording here, we talked about that idea of getting started with
Yes.
something or taking a chance. And I think my first step was math, science, got all the awards, high school, go study engineering at Tulane, go be an engineer at Procter& and Gamble. My first departure from what appeared to be a fairly defined path for me wasn't even the heading to B school. That's common, right? A lot of engineers go to
Yeah.
B school. But deciding I wasn't going to get a job and I was going to go work as an artist manager in the music business, it was the first time I sort of stepped out of myself and said, let me just do something else that no one
Right.
thought I would do. Now, my mom was still alive at that point. But again, back to what I shared earlier about how she was willing to just allow us, look, you're grown now. I've done all I can do. There was no dissent from it. Was like, yeah, go do it. That's what you want to go do. Go do. I'm 24 years old. I'm going to B school. So she passes during that phase of my life. I graduated Columbia '05. She passed '06. I'm still in New York at the time. I stayed there 2 years post business school. And I questioned after coming back to Chicago to manage all the affairs here. I decided I was going to go back to New York and continue to give it a shot. Because I was like, you know what? Mom would have said, yep, just go for it. If it doesn't work, you can always go back and do something else.
Right.
Sure enough, I had to go do something else because it did not work at all. The running joke, people always ask me, well, did you manage any music artists that we would know? And I say, well, of course not. If you knew them, they'd be famous. I'd still be in the music business right now. But talented artists, but again, just didn't quite work out, as it is with most people entering careers in music and entertainment, is that everyone's not going to experience the same level of success. But he's doing fine. I believe in New York, a really talented kid named Akil Dasan. I call him a kid, But here we are now, man, 13 or 18 years removed from me leaving New York, which is kind of insane to think that it's been that long.
Some people are forever kids in our mind. My baby sister is in her 30s and married, living in a different state. Still a kid.
Exactly. Say your baby sister. Say your baby sister.
Yes.
Yeah, so getting started is key. Just taking the step. I don't know if you saw this, but I did stand-up comedy for the first time about
No,
2
I
months ago.
didn't.
Yeah, I have to send you the link to that one as well. And
Yes.
it went well. I really enjoyed it. And it's one of those things you talk about needing to see the full picture or trying to get to perfection before you take the first step. I had been working on a routine in my phone for 5 years.
5 years?
True story. I could pull up a note on my phone that I started back in 2020 or 2021, and I would just write down things that I thought was funny.
Mhm.
Conversations I was having with people, concepts about everything, relationships, money, politics, sports, eating, the bathroom, just wherever I found comedy, I
Yeah.
would write it down. And then I would start ordering things, and I would just let it sit. I'd add something else, reorder it, let it sit. Then finally, a buddy of mine was hosting an event here called Vinyl and Comedy, music and comedy function. And he had some professional comics come in to do. I had 4 or 5 of them. I said, bro, let me get 4 minutes as the amateur, right? I won't mess it up. Just give me 4 minutes. And he agreed. He gave me
That's
the 4
awesome.
minutes. I went back to that routine. I started reordering it. I had never delivered it anywhere. I never practiced it in front of anyone except in my mind. But I think because it had been 4 or 5 years, it came off really smooth. Came off really smooth. I went ahead and did it again. And I'm planning to do it a third time in the next several weeks.
Oh, awesome. Keep me posted on when that is. When you're saying this, it reminds me of one of my favorite MLK quotes,
Mhm.
where he says that you don't have to see the whole staircase, you just need to take the first step. Yeah, I think often people don't give MLK enough credit for one, his sense of economic justice overall,
Mhm.
but the level of strategy and vision that he had. And also, like, and that quote is illustrative of this, that he didn't always start with a grand plan in mind.
Right, right.
He had the values alignment. He was very clear about what he was here to do. And sometimes you have to start moving before there's a full plan.
There's something called coefficients of static and kinetic friction.
Yes.
And for the viewers who are not into math and science, I'm gonna nerd out on you just a little bit, but
Love it.
it's essentially all the coefficient of static friction and kinetic friction says is that it is easier to keep an object moving to get one moving from rest. And we've
Yes.
all experienced that in some way. Once something starts moving, it's much easier to keep it moving. And so that static friction number, which is between 0 and 1. So think about if you're on like super slippery ice, that friction is 0. And if you're on like rough carpet or that might be at a level 1. That coefficient of static friction, it's hard. It's hard to get something moving
Yes.
sometimes, to open that door, to take that step, to put the foot
Overcome
in
the
the water.
inertia.
But once you're in it, it's like I'm moving now. So when I got on that stage, you can feel it. I mean,
Yes.
I was just flowing. And so now I got the bug. I'm ready to do it again, but I got the first one out of the way.
As we're kind of wrapping things up, I want to pull all of this together, because you are simultaneously, running an estate planning business, youth financial literacy initiatives, supporting diverse fund managers. So, can you talk about how these seemingly separate initiatives reinforce each other, and what your vision for a truly equitable economy might look like?
You got it. Well, the good news is only one of those is my main focus right now, right? So I've shifted from the work supporting diverse fund managers. VC Include, such an awesome organization working with founders of funds who are out supporting entrepreneurs, right? Because any of us in this entrepreneurial world, ultimately some level of capital, despite our discussions about anti-capitalism earlier, again, it's not the same thing. If anti-capitalism is not anti-money,
It
it's
is not.
it's anti-systemic injustice and the use of capital to oppress people. That's what people
Exactly.
miss out on, right? Money is
Yes.
money. Currency is currency, whether it's an American dollar or bartering or anything in between, right? And throughout
Right.
history, there's been exchange of goods and values and services. So I'm not here to ream against the idea of exchanging money for a beneficial good or service. But what VC Include is doing is awesome work, working with fund managers who professed their belief and desires around a more just and equitable system of moving capital, right? So I did some amazing work there. One Stock, One Future is still a mission, still a vision. I'm not actively doing workshops. If someone reaches out and says, Rendel, can you come talk to our youth? I am happy to organize that, right? And it may come back at some point on a grander scale. For now, solely focused on InHeirit, the online estate planning platform founded with Aston and Amanda. It's going incredibly well. We're fundraising right now, raising $250,000 for our friends and family round. We have 100,000 raised. We're in the separator. Thank you so much. And our beta is launching in early August to give people a first look at starting to go out and build that estate plan. We won't have all of the legal documentation ready yet. We're going to launch with just powers of attorney for health.
Okay.
But I think people even underestimate the importance and value of that template document. We tell the story about a young woman, sadly, the University of Miami, who recently had a really bad sailboating accident, was in the hospital. My understanding from just reading the press, I don't know the family, but the hospital, the police called the mother goes to the hospital can't really share information about what's happening with this 19-year-old young woman who's a sophomore at school, because now that she's an adult, I think parents often mistakenly believe that they still have certain rights over their child that they no longer have once in the eyes of the law when they turn 18. So HIPAA and privacy laws say that this mother who didn't have written documentation related to access to the child's health information couldn't get it. So she starts going to court and trying to fight for it. Sadly, the young woman passes away 3 weeks later. And so we are actively pushing this idea of make sure, and that's for living. Again, estate planning is not just about death. It's about management, control, joy, making sure your wishes are maintained and that trusted individuals in your life have access to the information that they need if the time comes where you're unable to make a decision for yourself. So we're looking forward to more people logging in there. As it relates to the equitable system, I'm going to give you an answer because it wouldn't be fair if I simply deferred. Part of my hesitation is these are such complex issues around society, humans, psychology, capital, economics, politics. But let me just throw out some things that I think might make for a just and equitable system. One, I often use a phrase, and this was going to be one of my next talks whenever I get to give one. And it's going to be probability versus possibility, or the other way around, haven't decided, but probability versus possibility. Because back to our conversation around speaking with the prior generation about the sacrifices and what they were able to accomplish in terms of helping folks like you and me accomplish what we've accomplished, I would say to them and say, look, yes, Rachel and Rendel are possible. I'm not going to deny that, right? With the right upbringing and structure and discipline and some luck, and it's possible, but it's still not probable. It is very much not probable for an Ida Solomon on the west side of Chicago with 3 kids to have 3 of them go to the schools that we attended, the college that we attended, 1 out of grad school, and all 3 of us, here we are doing well in our respective lives, living within minutes of each other here in the Bronzeville, Kenwood communities, seeing each other, hanging out, our kids playing with each other. Like, that's not probable. And so when I think about just and equitable societies, I want to increase probabilities of having our needs met, not just the possibility. And for too long, especially again within the Black community, this idea of excellence and overcoming and resilience, to me, that's still all about 1 out of every 10,000 of us
Yes.
achieving the levels of success that have been defined by others, as
Right.
opposed to as opposed to one of us having an extreme level of success, why can't all of us have some level of success? And now let's get to the second part of equitable and just. I'm not suggesting we should all have the same things, but unfortunately, and this is another key point here, the rewards that we receive today are not directly correlated with our output and effort. The rewards that people receive today are not directly correlated to their output and effort. Why? Because there are certain people and groups, and it's not just a race thing, but there are certain
Right.
people and groups where their rewards are outsized relative
Yes.
to their hard work and effort. And
Right.
so to me, a just and equitable society would say, if you work twice as hard, it's okay you get twice as much. That person chose not to work twice as hard. That's their choice. What's not fair is both people working twice as hard, but only one of them experiencing the career success, the financial success, the whatever, however you define successes. So I'll use those two things, possibilities versus probabilities, one where a broader swath of society is able to maintain, like, we just to have, I mean, I don't know, I can't remember the statistics, Rachel, you may know off the top of your head, but like half the country is living in poverty, I think.
Yeah, it is astonishing
It's
and
just, it's
taking a
it,
deep dive in the wrong direction.
yes. I mean, how does right, it's gonna get worse for a lot of people and sadly better for others. But
Yeah.
how do we live in a country where half the people can barely meet the basic needs of food, shelter, and clothing? That doesn't make sense. So that has to get resolved somehow. And I don't know the perfect answer for that. It's going to take some time. Some of the ways to get there may be considered unpopular as it relates to redistributions of resources. I'll close out with this. I was an advisor on an initiative called the Pre-Distribution Initiative. And so most folks are aware of this idea of redistributing wealth.
Yes.
So do you take from the rich, give to the poor, right? Classic Robin Hood. And what the Pre-Distribution Initiative sought to uncover through its work, it was a nonprofit, through its studies and research, was to say, what if we didn't have to redistribute wealth? What if the resources were never extracted in the first place from the people and the communities that needed it? Right now, the system is, back to this anti-capitalist conversation, someone, something, some entity comes in, extracts, hoards, hurts, destroys, builds wealth.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting that the product they created wasn't of value either, by the way. This is not about
Right.
the company. Maybe listen, I'm going to pick on this one company. Let's pick on Amazon for a second, right?
You have
Huge
to do it.
behemoth. It's something in the hallway right now from Amazon. I hate to say it, right? Have I disconnected from them? Absolutely not. I have not. But I can, two things can be true at the same time, right? And that is
Yes.
the conflict that we're all dealing with, those of us who are sort of in this battle around how do we survive and thrive within this structure that we're simultaneously trying to redefine. So pre-distribution again sought to say,
Absolutely.
well, if the entity didn't extract the resources in the first place, might the communities be better off because they were able to keep the resources as opposed to getting 10% of it back as
Right.
a donation to a nonprofit? Don't get me started on philanthropic community also ties into this issues around oppression and systemic injustice.
Yeah, an entirely different conversation that we could get into for a minute. But I have to say, for a question that you did not necessarily want to answer, that was a very eloquent response.
Yeah, okay, thankfully, it was something I had been thinking about already. Yep, possibility versus probabilities,
Yes,
and a system where our reward is more correlated to our effort. And right now, it's
absolutely.
not. If we can just get those two things done,
One of my good friends, Aaron, likes to say, I reserve the right to change my mind as I learn new information in the future. And I take that as, a blanket caveat for life because you talked a lot about how learning is a journey. It did not stop after your formal education, it's a continuous process. I think we all need to be open to that and say, based on the information I have right now, this is the best solution I have arrived at. As I learn more, I hope that I learn new and better ways to do things. But that doesn't mean that I don't do something now because I don't have a perfect solution.
Take the step.
This has been an absolutely amazing conversation. And I think if the people listening are walking away with just one thing, it is really that this is a journey, it is a marathon, not a sprint, and that you can get started regardless of your starting point and start making progress. And the important thing is that you are clear on your values and your boundaries. And if you're constantly checking in with that, you can find new and radically different ways to solve problems in ways that are not extractive. But it, means you have to be clear about what that North Star is for you. Oh, go
Kudos to
ahead.
you for doing this, by the way.
Oh,
And as I
thank you.
listen to you open and I hear your voice as somebody who has been told numerous times, I should do radio. I have a voice for this. I'm listening to you, and you just have this calmness, this real moderator radio.
Oh,
It seems like you were meant to do this, and at least on some level, not necessarily for the rest of existence. But this seems to fit. And so what you shared prior to us starting the recording about how you even questioned, was I going to do this? I mean, am I going to make this happen? I, for one, am glad you did, not just because you had me on the show, but just I think for us as a community, for other founders, other people working in corporate, anyone who's had to go through this journey of a major pivot is a critical conversation to have. And I think you're a great person to lead it.
thank you. I really appreciate it. That means a lot. I was sharing with Rendell before we got started that I actively had avoided, being in the spotlight and trying to push this conversation forward because I'm an introvert and I'm comfortable hiding in the background doing the work. But I do think it is really important that people who are going through these things, thinking through these things, realize that they are not alone and that it is possible to successfully do things in a drastically different way, that we don't have to just stick with the status quo because that's how it's always been done. And so the more people we can bring into this regenerative economy movement, the better off we will all be.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so, to those of you listening, if you've been inspired by Rendel's approach to building businesses that serve communities while creating sustainable profits, here's how you can connect with his work. You can visit getinherit.com to learn about their estate planning platform. Most importantly, I think that Rendell wants you to remember when it comes to the work that he's doing with Inherit is to start the conversation about legacy, reframe it that this is not just about death and morbidity, it's about living to secure your family's future and get back to joy. And so you'll be able to find all of these notes in our show notes, and you can follow Rendell's journey on LinkedIn, where he is regularly sharing insights. And maybe he'll share a little bit of that stand up comedy there too, so we all can check that out. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you get your podcast, and join us next time as we continue exploring what's possible when business becomes a force for justice, sustainability, and profit. Remember, the future of business isn't just about what you build, it's about who you become in the process and who you bring along with you. Until next time, keep shifting. I'll talk to you all soon.